Hi, this book we're going to read today is Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, written by Judy Barrett and illustrated by Ron Barrett. Look at the front cover. What do you think it would be like to have food coming down from the sky? What kind of food would you want? Well, this story is fiction and the author made it up. It couldn't happen in real life, so it is called fantasy fiction, but it's also under fantasy fiction. It follows a tall tale. Okay, so we're going to learn what is a tall tale today. In this book, you probably may have seen the movie, good chance. You're going to learn that some things do not turn out to be quite as you had hoped them to be. So let's go ahead and get started with Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. We were all sitting around the big kitchen table. It was Saturday morning, pancake morning. Mom was squeezing oranges for juice. Henry and I were betting on how many pancakes we each could eat. And Grandpa was doing the flipping. Seconds later, something flew through the air, headed toward the kitchen ceiling, and landed right on Henry. After we realized that the flying object was only a pancake, we all laughed, even Grandpa. Breakfast continued quite uneventfully. All the other pancakes landed in the pan, and all of them were eaten, even the one that landed on Henry. That night, touched off by the pancake incident at breakfast, Grandpa told us the best tall tale bedtime story he'd ever told. Now, tall tale is something that is so amazing that it just couldn't be true. Let's get ready to hear what this tall tale is. Across an ocean, over lots of huge bumpy mountains, across 3 hot deserts and 1 smaller ocean, there lay the tiny town of Chew and Swallow. Chew and Swallow. What? Now, in most ways, it was very much like any other town. It had a main street lined with stores, houses with trees and gardens around them, and a schoolhouse, about 300 people, and some assorted cats and dogs. But there were no food stores in the town. They didn't need any. The sky supplied all the food they could possibly want. The only thing that was really different about Chew and Swallow was its weather. It came 3 times a day. At breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Everything that everyone ate came from the sky. Can you imagine? Your food fell from the sky. Whatever the weather served, that was what they ate. But it never rained rain, it never snowed snow, and it never blew just wind. It rained things like soup and juice. It snowed mashed potatoes and green peas. And sometimes the wind blew in storms of hamburgers. Now the people could watch the weather report on television in the morning, and they would even hear a prediction for the next day's food. I wonder what they used to determine and make their predictions for the next day's food. Like today or yesterday, we were all watching the prediction of, or I guess it was Saturday, of the storm moving through and what they were predicting, and they followed all these charts. So I'm wondering what their meteorologists would see on their charts in Chew and Swallow. Now, when the townspeople went outside, they carried their plate, cups, glasses, forks, spoons, knives, and napkins with them. That way, they would always be prepared for any kind of weather. If there were leftovers, and there usually were, the people took them home and put them in their refrigerators in case they got hungry between meals. The menu varied. By the time they woke up in the morning, breakfast was coming down. After a brief shower of orange juice, low clouds of sunny-side-up eggs moved in, followed by pieces of toast. Butter and jelly sprinkled down for the toast. And most of the time, it rained milk afterwards. For lunch one day, Frankfurters, already in their rolls, blew in from the northwest at about 5 miles an hour. What is a I can't even say it. Frankfurter. Now, if you look closely at the illustration, it'll give you a good clue. Yeah, they're like hot dogs. There were mustard clouds nearby. Then the wind shifted to the east and brought in baked beans. A drizzle of soda finished off the meal. Now, dinner one night consisted of lamb chops, becoming heavy at times with occasional ketchup. Periods of peas and baked potatoes were followed by gradual clearing with a wonderful Jell-O setting in the west. You see the Jell-O bowl? Now, the sanitation department of Chew and Swallow had a rather unusual job for a sanitation department. It had to remove the food that fell on the houses and sidewalks and lawns. The workers cleaned things up after every meal and fed all the dogs and cats. Then they emptied some of it into the surrounding oceans for the fish and turtles and whales to eat. The rest of the food was put back into the earth so that the soil would be rich for the people's flower gardens. So sanitation department must mean that they are the ones that kind of clean up the streets and pick up garbage and trash and stuff, because that's what they did afterwards. Sanitation must be like the cleanup crew. Now, life for the townspeople was delicious until the weather took a turn for the worse. The Chew and Swallow Digest. Spaghetti ties uptown. Traffic snarled on Lower Intestine Street. Record-breaking pasta fall causes chaos. Those are the headlines in the paper that day. Well, one day, there was nothing but gorgonzola cheese all day long. The next day, there was only broccoli, all overcooked. And the next day, there were Brussels sprouts and peanut butter with mayonnaise. Another day, there was a pea soup fog. No one could see where they were going, and they could barely find the rest of the meal that got stuck in the fog. Those would be some rough days. Now, the food was getting larger and larger, and so were the portions. The people were getting frightened. Violent storms blew up frequently. Awful things were happening. One Tuesday, there was a hurricane of bread and rolls all day long and into the night. There were soft rolls and hard rolls, some with seeds and some without. There was white bread and rye and whole wheat toast. Most of it was larger than they had ever seen bread and rolls before. It was a terrible day. Everyone had to stay indoors. Roofs were damaged, and the sanitation department was beside itself. The mess took the workers 4 days to clean up, and the sea was full of floating rolls. Now, to help out, the people piled up as much bread as they could in their backyards. The birds picked at it a bit, but it just stayed there and got staler and staler. What does staler mean? I know when I leave bread out on my kitchen counter, it tends to get hard and it's no longer that soft freshness. So I'm wondering, so staler must mean something about it gets old and hard and not as soft and yummy. Well, there was a storm of pancakes one morning and a downpour of maple syrup that nearly flooded the town. A huge pancake covered the school, and no one could get it off because of its weight, so they had to close the school. That the rain of syrup, the downpour of syrup, made me think of, remember when we read the molasses flood? So I would think syrup would be kind of sticky like the molasses was in the Great Molasses Flood. Now, oh goodness, lunch one day brought 15-inch drifts of cream, cheese, and jelly sandwiches. Everyone ate themselves sick, and the day ended with a stomach ache. There was an awful salt and pepper wind accompanied by an even worse tomato tornado. People were sneezing themselves silly and running to avoid the tomatoes. The town was a mess. There were seeds and pulp everywhere. Now, the sanitation department gave up. This job was just too big. Everyone feared for their lives. They couldn't go outside most of the time. Many houses had been badly damaged by giant meatballs. Stores had boarded up, and there was no more school for the children. Kind of feels like what we're doing right now, right? Except it's not, because we have food falling from the sky. So a decision was made to abandon the town of Chew and Swallow. It was a matter of survival. Abandon town. What do you think abandon means? Give it some thought. Abandon. They decided it was time to abandon the town of Chew and Swallow. Yeah. What do you think would happen if the people did not abandon the town? So what did you, I assume you came up with abandon means to leave it alone, to let it be. Why were they abandoning the town? Yeah, because the food was getting so big that was falling from the sky that it was damaging. They couldn't even go outside. They couldn't go to school. They couldn't go to work. They might not have been able to Zoom each other. Could you imagine living like that? Huh, that'd be terrible. So abandon here means to leave. And I would think, yeah, I might have to abandon too if it got that dangerous that a pancake fell in our school. Craziness. Well, the people, but how are they going to get out? Let's read and find out. The people glued together the giant pieces of stale bread, sandwich style, with peanut butter, took the absolute necessities with them, and set sail on their rafts for a new land. After being afloat for a week, they finally reached a small coastal town. Ooh, afloat. They've been on the rafts they made out of the stale bread, so afloat must mean to be floating around and at sea. Now, the bread had held up surprisingly well enough for them to build temporary houses for themselves out of it. The children began school again, and the adults all tried to find places for themselves in the new land. The biggest change they had to make was getting used to buying food at a supermarket. They found it odd that the food was kept on shelves, packaged in boxes, cans, and bottles. Meat that had to be cooked was kept in a large refrigerator. Nothing came down from the sky except rain and snow. The clouds above their heads were not made of fried eggs. No one ever got hit by a hamburger again. And nobody dared to go back to Chew and Swallow to find out what had happened to it. They were too afraid. Henry and I were awake until the very end of Grandpa's story. I remember his goodnight kiss. The next morning, we woke up to see snow falling outside our window. We ran downstairs for breakfast and ate it a little faster than usual so we could go sledding with Grandpa. It's funny, but even as we were sledding down the hill, we thought we saw a giant pat of butter at the top, and we could almost smell mashed potatoes. Why do Henry and his sister think they can see and smell butter and mashed potatoes when they are sledding with Grandpa? Think back to what happened earlier in the story. That's going to be one of your questions today. Okay, so we have to go to answer that. Remember, the answers, this is kind of like an inferencing. You're going to take a guess. The answer's not written right in the text, but it gave you clues earlier as to why they may now be smelling and seeing butter and mashed potatoes. Okay, so we're going to dig deep into our thinking brain for that inference. The end. What a tall tale. Remember I said this is going to be a tall tale. It's something that cannot happen in real life. Could you imagine if on Saturday, instead of the rain we got and all of that, that we would have gotten food falling down? What food would you have wanted to fall from the sky? I've been thinking about that. That's a tough one. Yeah, there's so many options. I mean, jelly beans, we know jelly beans are always good, especially the all red ones. Then I thought, you know what? I do like green beans, so green beans would be okay too. And probably if I had a third choice, I've been enjoying hot tea, so maybe some hot tea would be good for a drink. And soup. Always a good veggie soup. I always enjoy that. So that would be a nice little treat. So think about, what are some things you would want to fall from the sky? And why would you choose to have that? All right, you are going to go to your assignment in Google Classroom now. Remember, use the book I created for you. Open up the document, the Google Slide document, and you will see each page that I just read from you from the actual book is in there. And it's going to have the text written as well, so that you can use that. You may have to change tabs. Okay, so read the question, then go to the tab that has the slides in it, and look for the page with your answer in it that you want to use for your answer. Please restate the question. Remember how to restate when I say, what color is your shirt? You don't say purple. No, you say, my shirt is purple, or the color of my shirt is purple. If I ask you, what is your favorite sport? You say, my favorite sport is, and whatever it is. If I said, what did you do over the weekend? You would respond with, over the weekend, tell me what you did. Okay, so that is your restating. Don't forget it. Another thing I'm going to let you do, so that this, if your parents are up for it, is they can, if it's typing that's slowing you down and you prefer to write your answers, you may get out a piece of paper and write your answers out on paper in cursive, please, if you're writing, because we need to practice cursive a lot. You can write it on paper, take a picture of that and email it to me, and that way I can see it on there and you don't have to type it out. If you want to type it out, that is fantastic. I love it. It's good practice. You could also ask your parents to help you type it out if you're one that wants to type it out. Just ask them if they have the time. If they do not have the time, you may not throw a fit. Got it? No fits at all, ever. And lastly, if you're at a question that you're like, Mrs. King, I have no idea what to write here. None. And mom and dad aren't available, or mom and dad say, I don't know, which is fine. It's okay. They don't have to know. They're not in second grade anymore. Then you need to send me a message in Google Hangouts or an email or on Class Dojo. Send me a message and I will link in with you and we can talk about it together. So do not say, I don't know, and don't answer. That is not okay. Right? Because you know, if you're in class and you said, I don't know the answer, what would I say? Yes, I would say, well, you have to think, you have to try and do your best. All right? Enjoy your assignment, and I cannot wait to read our next story tomorrow.